All right, so I just want to create this podcast because I just feel it's important for me to document my thoughts at this time. So this podcast basically is not meant to convince anybody. I'm not trying to convince anybody into a particular mindset or a particular way of thinking or try to convey a particular set of values. The reason I'm doing this podcast really is to document what I have in my mind. It has been on my mind to document this in one way or the other for a couple of years now, for about 2 years. But I've been thinking of the right words to use. But then I realized that the words don't really matter as much. I'm putting too much value on the words, and that's because I'm thinking of trying to convince people. So I said, no, I know I'm not going to try to convince anybody. I'm just going to try to just state this as it is in my mind and just document it. And so this is for someone out there that one day would listen to this and it validates how they feel. It's very important to say this, that if you're going to listen to this, don't try to be convinced. Just it's for that person that needs validation of what they already know, not a conviction of things they are not really ready to know. So what I want to talk about today is um, is a warning to myself, to anybody listening out there to this podcast. Maybe in the future, it might be my kids, my grandkids, anyone out there. Because I believe that this thing is still going to matter in years to come. It's probably not going to change. It's a very foundational thing to the social structure of the world. So it's probably not going to change anytime soon. But what I want to talk about today is a warning on 3 institutions that hamper your freedom and your existence as a human being. 3 big institutions that hamper your freedom and your existence as a human being. And these 3 big institutions have a way of making you very unhappy, killing your esteem, and killing your relationships. And I think the biggest thing that these 3 institutions do is to take away your will as a human being. So I'm not going to go quickly into it. I don't want to spend too much time talking on this podcast. The first institution that we need to be careful of that takes away our will, takes away our freedom, and limits our existence as human beings is the banking institution, the financial institution called the bank. And this is an institution that has been around for decades and centuries. But then a lot of us have come over time to trust this institution called the bank or the banking system. But one thing I want you to know is that for every single one of these institutions that I'm going to outline, starting with the bank, is what they thrive on is sowing a seed of insecurity. That's the general underlying thing with all these 3 institutions I'm going to talk about. A seed of insecurity. And the seed of insecurity that the bank sows in people's souls is the insecurity that your wealth is not safe in your hands. That your wealth is not safe in your hands. In fact, what this institution does is make you think that immediately you come across any wealth, whether big or small, that wealth will feel like a hot potato in your hands till you toss it to the banking institution. So the first insecurity and the major insecurity banks thrive on is that your wealth is not safe with you, that you do not know how to manage your own resources of money. And this is a big insecurity. It's a big insecurity that has been sown in a lot of us from when we were very young. We never were taught how to manage money. And I don't even think manage money is even a good term. I'm talking about how to control money. how to not be scared of money. I talk about my dogs a lot, and one thing I realized is when my kids started growing up, my dogs are pretty big, especially my male dog. It's a pretty big, large breed. But I tell them every time, it doesn't matter what the size is, it will respect you if it realizes that you don't fear it. If it realizes that there's no fear in you, it will subdue to you. It doesn't care what your size is. Yes, it's bigger than you, it's taller than you, it's heavier than you. But what it's looking for is that sense of leadership that you have over it. And that's the same thing with money. A lot of us have this fear of money, have this overt respect for money. And I don't blame any of us. It's something we've been indoctrinated in from time. That we are bad managers of money inherently, and we need to give it to an institution. Now, this makes us avoid money rather than engage with it. It makes us put it away rather than parent it. It's just like a person that has a child. If you have a child, a couple have a child, and they give it to another family, what will happen in the long run is an estrangement of that child from that family. That child that they've given away in adoption will not grow in love and respect for its real family, but will grow in love and respect for his adopted family. I'm reading a book on Steve Jobs, and it's a really good book by Walter Isaacson. And it talks about Steve Jobs' life and how he was given up for adoption, and how Steve Jobs always referred to his biological parents as just egg and sperm donors. In that book, he never spoke about them with respect, but then he spoke about his adopted parents with a lot of glowing admiration. And that's because when he was born, they gave him away. Money will never respect you. If immediately you get it, you give it away. Like a child, money, when you get it, will be petulant, disobedient, unruly, do some things that will break your heart. It will be like if you don't know how to manage it. That's the truth. The same thing with parenting. When you have kids, what happens is that your first few years, and when I say few years, I'm talking about maybe your first 13 years, sometimes even up to your first 18 years, it kind of feels like you don't have a hold on this thing called parenting. It kind of seems like you're not communicating. It kind of seems like you are flat out failing. But you never give your child away because you feel like you're failing. What you do is you continue to build and build and build relationships. And those who don't give up eat the fruit of parenting. They realize that they begin to understand their children, and their children begin to understand and respect them. But it takes time. The same thing with money. If you continue to get money and the first instinct is to give it away to a financial institution, whether a bank or an investment company that tells you we will take care, you are doing exactly the same thing a parent does when they give up their children for adoption and they expect that children to come back after years to love them. Never going to happen. The child would always return back to his adopted parents, the bank, the investment institution. So it's okay to fail with money. Failing with money is an education in understanding money and allowing money understand you. The people who are open to failing with money are those who end up mastering money. I spoke about dogs earlier on, and there's a dog whisperer who I follow his content a lot, Cesar Millan. And I don't think there are many people that I know that have been beaten by a dog as much as Cesar Millan. He has been beaten by hundreds of dogs. But in getting beaten, he understands them better, they understand him better. I watch episodes of Dog Whisperer, which is Cesar Millan's show, where he starts out with the dog. The dog hates him. The dog wants to kill him, wants to go for his jugular. The dog bites him. But at the end of the day, the dog comes to a place of respect and submission to him. That's the same thing with money. But this financial institution called the bank has sowed this seed of insecurity on our inside to make us feel that money is not safe in our hand and we should give it up for adoption. So they can train our money. But when they train our money to always come back to them. The second institution I want to talk about is the school, the educational institution. This is a very interesting and very powerful institution also, that also steals our sense of freedom and plants in us an insecurity. Now, this insecurity the school system plants in us is the insecurity about our knowledge and our skill, and tells us our knowledge and our skill will never matter until it goes through this furnace and refining called schooling. Now, that is a big fallacy, because school is not a compass. School is not a compass. It doesn't teach you the direction to go. School is not where your skills come from. Your skills, a lot of times, the best of your skills are innate skills. If you're going to shine in life at all, I'm talking about stand out in life, you hardly stand out from acquired skill. You stand out from innate skill. Innate, that which you were born with. There's a difference between schooling and education. Schooling has to do with going to an institution. Education has to do with discovering more about yourself and the things around you. Education never stops. Education is not restricted to a place and restricted to having human teachers. School is. Education has no classes. School does. Education has no report card. School does. Education has no graduation. School does. Education sometimes has no classmates. School does. School plants in us the insecurity that our knowledge, our innate abilities are worthless till they say it is worth something. And so I see a lot of people, incredible abilities, hiding under a shell, very insecure about the fact that they didn't get to a particular level of schooling or didn't go to school at all. But some of these people are probably some of the most educated people I've ever met. They learn every single day about small things in really profound ways. Some of the most interesting people are the unschooled people that I have had conversations with. The unschooled people. School teaches us to fit in. It teaches us to follow a regiment. It teaches us to seek permission. It teaches us to go by other people's validation. It teaches us to silence the soul and to minimize innate skill. It teaches us to go by the law of average. So what the school thinks, or how the school grades progress or learning, is what can the average person do. So when you have a class of 6-year-olds, the teacher grades whether they are doing well in school, whether a child is doing well or not, by what the average 6-year-old should be able to do. School thrives on average. If you can get over that bell curve, that hump of average, then the school will give you a pass. But we know that we weren't created to be average. We are created to be excellent. And as I said earlier, the sweet spot of excellence is not in an acquired place. It's in an innate skill. It's an innate skill. That's why the best place where you can get an education is from your parents. If the parents are not too distracted, every parent should be able to watch their children and look at where their innate skills lie and help them to build that innate skill. There is no school that is patient enough to watch each child to find out what's special about them. The school goes by the law of the average. What should an average child at this age be able to do? Tells you your skill is not good enough till it goes through the refinery of school. It's a very dangerous place for the human mind to be. Very. I remember going, people that know me, they know me as a graphic designer. I've always been artistic. I'm an artistic type kind of person. As I said, from the day I was born, I can't remember learning how to draw. It just came to me naturally. It came to me naturally. I knew how to draw. My memory for drawing was incredible. I could watch something on TV, and in a few minutes, the details are in my head. I can recreate that thing. I just needed to see it to recreate how what the character looks like. And my son is like that. He has taken after me. It's an innate thing. But school almost shattered me because every time I drew in school, they told me to pack up my drawings and get ready for mathematics, English, moral instruction, social studies, sciences. I was told in not so direct ways that drawing was not important, that my innate skills didn't matter. The school told me that for many years. I felt so insecure. I felt so lost. I felt so useless. And there I was. I started to admire those who had great innate skills for sciences, art, or mathematics. And I looked down at my own innate skills. This went on for many years, from my primary school to my secondary school to my university years, until I went for my postgraduate. When I went to Canada to study computer interactive multimedia, I tell people they didn't teach me anything I didn't already know there in terms of academics. The only thing they taught me was something I didn't know, which was how valuable my innate skills were. I had lecturers that told me, even from the first week, you are an amazing artist. You have an incredible mind for art. I can't remember a lot of the subject matters we learned in class. All they did every single day was build up my esteem. They built up my esteem. They pushed me out there and said, go ahead and show the world what you can do. That thing which you didn't have to learn. I remember thanking one of my teachers who taught me in Canada a while back and just putting up a post on Facebook thanking him. And he wrote me back saying, Tola, you shouldn't thank me. You had this thing in you already before you came to Canada. If I did anything at all, was just to show you a mirror of who you were. That man gave me an education. He put in me something that the school system almost killed. And since that day, I became free to treasure that which I had in me, the innate skill I had. So I used school as more or less a validator. So now, when I go out, I don't tell people that I'm a designer because I went to a particular school. I tell them I'm a designer because that's my gift. That's what I was chosen to do. Your knowledge Your skill, your abilities are good enough. Stop working in the insecurity that you couldn't go to a great school. Stop working in that insecurity. Start using what you have. Start using it and you'll be surprised. You'll be amazed how far that unschooled knowledge can take you. Let school be a validator of what you have already. If you like to write, start to write. If you like to paint, start to paint. If you like to sing, start to sing. And by doing that, you would meet people who will begin to bring your way things that can enhance it, what you already have in you. But it doesn't start from school, it starts from self-discovery. And then school comes to help you validate that which you have found in you already. The third thing that limits our freedom and minimizes our existence as human beings is the institution called religion. Religion plants in us a very grave insecurity. The insecurity that we are not good enough to engage with our God. That we are not good enough to enjoy our God, to have an intimate relationship with our Creator. This by far is the worst insecurity a human being can have. Nothing can be worse. The insecurity about your money, about your skill, don't hold a candle to the insecurity about your spirituality. Religion tells us that our Creator wants to have nothing to do with us till we are ready to jump some hoops. It tells us our Creator doesn't love us until we do certain things, till we obey certain rules, till we go to particular places. This is very unfortunate. And in my years of mentoring and counseling and talking to people, this lies at the very core of people's sense of a lack of identity and people's deep sadness. Religion has come to be one of the biggest polarizing institutions in the world. And this is really sad, because opposite is the case in terms of the way our Creator feels about us. Our Creator loves us. He cares deeply about us. He wants nothing else than to have a relationship with us. He wants us to come to Him freely, not judging ourselves, not looking down on ourselves, but being immersed in His love. He wants us to enjoy His world and the experience in His world. He wants us to enjoy the nature of His world. He wants to love us. And He wants us to convey that love to one another. But how can we love one another when deep inside we do not love ourselves? How can we accept one another when deep inside we do not accept ourselves? When we have a snobbery towards each other orchestrated by what we call today religion. Religion is not faith. Faith is believing that you are wanted, that you matter, that you are loved, that you have an essence, that you have a mission, that you are not a statistic, that you have direct access to Him who made you, that He speaks to you through your thoughts, through your feelings, through your intuitions, through your memory, through your passions, through your creativity. Not through a man or a woman in an elevated position. When you understand this, you understand what it means to be free as a human being. When you understand that you were designed, that someone planned for you, you are not a victim of some random evolution, some cell that just decided to modify. You are not an accident. You are intentional. And every single part of you, within you, outside of you, was intended for. You begin to see the world differently. You begin to experience life differently. You begin to love differently. You begin to live differently. You become free. As I said earlier, that this podcast is not to convince anyone. This podcast is not to open up a discussion or to have an argument. This is one of the very selfish podcasts I'll be making. It's for me. It's to remind myself when I forget. And by chance, if someone listens to this and has been thinking these thoughts and you've been thinking, I'm mad. I must be mad to think this thought. Let this be a validation to the fact that you aren't mad. You are just one step closer to true freedom. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and you've been listening to my podcast, ProUp Masterclass.